Good afternoon. National Assembly of Wales is now in session, and the first item this afternoon questions the First Minister. And question 1 is Eluned Parrott.
Diolch, Llywydd. Will the First Minister make a statement on plans for the M4 relief road around Newport?
Yes, our proposal for the M4 corridor around Newport is the sustainable long-term solution to the current problems associated with that route, and it forms an essential part of our vision for an efficient integrated transport system for South Wales.
Thank you for that answer, First Minister. I wonder if you could confirm for me how many millions of pounds the former leader of Plaid Cymru spent on buying up land to enable this road to be built back when Plaid still thought that building a new M4 was a good idea. And could you confirm for me, again, for the heart of understanding, that the budget agreement between the Welsh Government and the Welsh Liberal Democrats, that was while environmental assessments would take place, no building contract would be awarded during this Assembly term?
Well, I can confirm that remains the case, of course, as per the agreement. I can't answer for the previous leader of Plaid Cymru, but nevertheless, as a government, we have outlined our plan for how to take this issue forward.
William Graham.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, may I confirm, as you well know, that we are firmly in favour of a relief road for the M4 around Newport. Could I ask you particularly, on the present consultation, it says here, every pound spent on the motorway will equal £2 in benefits. Would you care to enlarge on that?
Well, firstly, I'm grateful to the member for confirming that the Welsh Conservatives are indeed all in favour of the relief road. He will know that from the assessments that we have made, that removing what is an extremely difficult area for traffic congestion around Newport will make it easier to access businesses and indeed properties further west. We know that the situation is not going to get better. We know that there is an adverse effect on air quality as a result of cars idling on a regular basis around the tunnels. We know from what CBI have said, for example, that the benefits for Wales are enormous, for South Wales are enormous, if we can make sure that this traffic bottleneck is dealt with.
Question 2, Lindsay Whittle.
Dear Llywydd, First Minister, what is the total cost so far of planning the M4 relief road for Newport?
Yes, since July of 2014, or since the 2014 decision was taken, costs were £4.2 million in 2014 to 15. They're forecast to be £19.8 million in 2015 to 16. That expenditure is what is necessary to correctly inform the statutory decision-making process.
Thank you, First Minister, for that reply. But the question I asked, what was the total cost? Now, in addition to the nearly £20 million spent this year, a total of £12 million has been spent on buying properties and a further £20 million on consultant fees, giving a total of at least £52 million, and not a single inch of tarmac has been laid yet. And we know you have purchased 15 properties for £20 million, and you've already resold 7 of those. What steps will the Welsh Government be taking to make it clear to landowners and homeowners on the Gwent levels as to whether their property is likely to be blighted by this proposed black route? First Minister, it's the wrong route, ridiculously expensive. Reject it now.
Well, let me remind the member of what the blue route would mean. 30 residential properties would need to be demolished. More than double, actually, the black route. We know from the strategic appraisal of alternatives, which members can access, that, for example, just at one roundabout, the junction between the A48 Southern Distributor Road and the A4810 Steelworks Road, 20 commercial premises would need to be demolished just at that roundabout. So a number of commercial premises would need to be demolished in order for the road to be built. It's also a situation that would be a dual carriageway, not a 6-lane highway, which creates the same problem with the funnelling effect that already exists at the Brynglas tunnels. It also creates the same problem that existed between Corryton and Cardiff Gate, where the road had to be widened in order to deal with the traffic. There are also adverse effects on junctions, particularly for the Glanllyn development, and there are negative effects in terms of access to tar to steel. So we can't pretend the blue route is somehow problem-free. It clearly isn't. Now, that said, the member surely must accept that we can't actually build a road of this magnitude without going through a proper statutory consultation process. There will be a full public inquiry in the autumn of next year. We expect that process can examine all the evidence. with the final decision being taken in 2017. I don't think the member would really want us to, in some way, shorten the consultation process with a view to getting the road built more quickly. It's important that there is a proper process that's followed.
Nick Ramsey.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And can I remind the First Minister what the Black Route will actually mean for the area around the south of Newport? It will cut across at least five triple SIs. It will sever the North Dock from the South Dock of Newport, Port of Newport. And of course, it will increase average journey times for some commuters along the existing motorway, which you are planning to demotorway. Will you now accept what is blatantly obvious, First Minister? It's time to review all of this, look at all the route options, not just the black route, including the blue route, and get on with providing a solution that will actually work and is acceptable.
Seem to be living in a parallel universe here, as does he. I mean, not 5 minutes ago, I heard one of his own front benchers say that they're in favour of the relief road. Now, we know that there are well-known and documented public differences between members on that side of the chamber. We saw them on Twitter, didn't we? And we know that there is a great deal of disunity on this issue. Well, again, I come back to the point that I made earlier on. That is, that we have already conducted an assessment of the Blue Route. Members can find it at gov.wales/M4 Newport. That strategic appraisal of alternatives report is there, and that informed our decision to adopt a plan in July of 2014. As I say, the Blue Route, I know, finds favour with some members. It would cost between £600 and £800 million. It could not be delivered more quickly. It would deliver a dual carriageway, which wouldn't resolve the problem at all. We'd end up in a situation where we'd have to widen the road at some point in the future to deal with the problems. There are more residential properties that are potentially affected, far more commercial and industrial properties that are potentially affected. There are 4,000 homes at Glan Llyn, which I've seen, which again will be right slap bang against the motorway, so they will be adversely affected. And indeed, of course, we know that many junctions would need to be closed along the existing route if the Blue Route were to be adopted. So there are huge problems with the Blue Route. We understand, of course, that the situation is controversial. We've heard views within the chamber. But we've made the assessment, we've taken the decision the black route is the way forward, but of course there will be a proper statutory process that we have to follow.
We now move to questions of the party leaders, and first this afternoon, the Welsh Democrat leader, Kirsty Williams.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, can you explain to the people of North Wales why it is that only 60% of them receive urgent radiotherapy within 14 days, whereas in South Wales the figure is almost 100%?
So the need to replace a machine in Glan-Clwyd. That is something I know that the Health Board is looking at, and I believe it forms the subject of their meeting today.
Indeed, First Minister, perhaps one of the reasons why those figures are so starkly different for patients in North Wales to those in the South is because we need an additional new linear accelerator at Ysbyty Glan-Clwyd. Now, the charitable sector have pledged to fund the capital costs of buying that machine for North Wales patients. And the Health Board is indeed debating today whether they can afford to staff that new machine. Of course, this is the same Health Board that had to reject new prostate cancer equipment, which was agreed between your party and mine as part of a budget deal because they couldn't afford to run the machine. What are you going to do to ensure that people in North Wales get access to that linear accelerator?
Well, we would encourage, of course, the Health Board to look carefully at the proposal. We stand ready to help them, and it's right to say that the level of access is different between North and South, and that cannot be allowed to continue.
Thank you, First Minister. Sometimes all of us here in this chamber can be guilty of focusing relentlessly on targets, but a recent IWA event that looked into patients' experience of cancer services in Wales highlighted some of the real concerns that those patients and their family had. They included worries over how they would physically get to their hospital appointments, how long they would have to wait in the hospital once they got there. And there was real confusion over your government's promise that everyone would have a key worker. What steps are you taking to ensure that these very real concerns, but sometimes the concerns that aren't debated fully here in the Assembly, are addressed when developing cancer services in Wales?
Well, this all forms part, of course, of the Cancer Delivery Plan. We do know that the Wales Cancer Patient Experience Survey took place in 2013, showed that 89% of respondents rated their care as very good or excellent. We know that the 31-day and 62-day targets are there, and we know that we have a good story to tell in terms of those targets. And we know, of course, that for the first time, over 70% of people diagnosed with cancer are now surviving for at least 1 year. 5-year survival is also increasing, and that is something to celebrate. It's also true the number of urgent suspected cancer referrals has increased by 12% over the last year, but the service has been able to manage the continuing improvement in terms of the service that it delivers, even with that substantial increase in the number of referrals.
That's free. We now move to the Leader of the Opposition, Andrew Archie-Davis.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, under your government, adult part-time education budget has been cut by 50%. There are now 90,000 less adults in part-time learning than there were 10 years ago. Your own skills minister said that the decisions have been made have been awful decisions. Do you agree that the decisions that she has taken in this particular area, and your government more generally, to cut 90,000 places and 50% of the funding for part-time adult learning are awful decisions?
He is spinning like a whirling dervish when he says that, because as he knows full well, what the minister said was they've been awful decisions to make. And there have been awful decisions to make because of the cuts we've received from the UK government, from his own government. We have nevertheless, of course, introduced Jobs Growth Wales, which has enabled many young people to get a job. Over 17,000 job opportunities created. And he does have some nerve in complaining about this when his own party, his own policy, is to cut education spending by at least 12%. So if he came here and suggested we should cut education more, that would be in line with his own policy. But for him to turn around and say that more money should be spent on education runs counter to his own policy and the cuts his own party has made.
First Minister, we would empower people to actually learn and develop as they go through their lives. Ultimately, it's about balance and it's about decision. Your policy seems to be ageist, First Minister, in that the older you get in Wales, the less chance you have to educate yourself and retrain yourself. Do you not think, therefore, that the policy decisions that you have taken do need revisiting and that you do need to readdress the imbalance that exists in the training provision that is available to older people in Wales, especially when they seek that retraining in later life?
Yes, of course we want older people to have access to training, but we know in particular that people need to acquire skills young as well, which is why we have Jobs Growth Wales. We're not in the business of attacking young people, as his party is. We see that, of course, in the benefit system. We see that in all the benefits that have been taken away from young people. And now, of course, we know he wants to increase tuition fees just the same as England. I mean, not even a different policy in Wales, but whatever England does, we want to do in Wales. And to increase student tuition fees so our students pay 18,000 more per year. Well, he has to explain how it is that he wants to improve access to education, yet make it more expensive.
First Minister, I believe that if someone's approaching a vocational course in FE, they deserve the same level of support as someone going to higher education. I appreciate I never went to higher education. I didn't have a free education like some people sitting around here. I actually went out and earned a vocational trade.
Go boarding school.
Now, what I am saying to you, First Minister, is that as the Older Persons Commissioner pointed out, on the weekend, your position seems to be ageist, in that the older you are, the less chance you get to have support from the Welsh Government, and as I've pointed out, 50% cuts, 90,000 less places available. You can only deduce from that that you do have an ageist policy when it comes to supporting older people retraining in the workplace. We have a clear policy of supporting people across the education estate. We believe that you shouldn't discriminate against one sector over another. Will you revisit your policy, or are you going to stick to your ageist policies?
What we won't do is launch a war on the young, as he has done and his party has done. He says he wants people to have support in FE. Does he support the Assembly Learning Grant then? Is that something that he fully supports? No, he doesn't. I thought not. He hasn't thought of that when he was on his feet. And why is it then that he fails to support the tuition-free grant? Why is it that he says, whatever England must do, it does, we must follow in Wales? We don't agree with that. We think that we have sort of Welsh policies for Welsh issues. And I have to say to him, he mentions free education as if it was something abnormal. I didn't go to boarding school. No, that's true. I went to a comprehensive. As like most people in this chamber, I don't see free education as something that we should see as a privilege. It's a right to have a free education. We want to make sure that people have a good free education in schools, a good free education in FE colleges, a reasonable access to cheap education in universities, all the things that his party opposes.
We now would Leader of Plaid Cymru, Leanne Wood.
First Minister, there are reports today of you having held constructive discussions with the Secretary of State for Wales on the draft Wales Bill. Are you in a position to share with us the contents of those discussions, please, today?
Well, yes. I mean, I made the point to the Secretary of State, and it's a point that he has accepted publicly, so I'm not saying anything beyond the meeting, that trying to construct a reserve powers model within one jurisdiction of England and Wales is exceptionally difficult. There will need to be a great deal of work to ensure that any new act is something that does not restrict the powers of this Assembly and, of course, doesn't make it more difficult for the Assembly to operate.
Thank you for your answer, First Minister, and it's welcome that the Secretary of State for Wales appears to be rowing back on withdrawing some of those powers that the Assembly currently has. Now, it seems that the main stumbling block remains the issue of the Welsh legal jurisdiction. Were there any indications from the Secretary of State to revisit that question, please?
He won't revisit it. Now, the easiest way to resolve the reserve powers model issue is via a single jurisdiction. It can be done without one, but it's immensely more complicated. And more vigilance needs to be exercised to make sure that powers are not inadvertently removed from this chamber. And that is something that officials will continue to discuss with Wales Office officials over the coming weeks and months.
First Minister, I know that you would agree with me that the issue of a distinct legal jurisdiction is crucial for a working devolution system that delivers for people here. And you and I have both repeatedly made the point that Wales is the odd one out on these islands on this matter, and for whatever historical reasons, the democratic maturity of this country now means that a jurisdiction is vital. The entire St David's Day process has been a race to the bottom. It's been called by some as the lowest common denominator approach. It started with Whitehall departments being asked what they would be prepared to devolve rather than consideration of what's in the best interests of people here in Wales. So we can now expect a weak bill that will undoubtedly lead to the need for another bill almost immediately. So if current talks provide futile again, would your party be prepared to join with mine to defeat the bill and seek a new one after next year's Welsh general election, when a new Welsh government is elected on a new mandate for the next stage of devolution?
That depends, of course, on what's in the bill. At the moment, it's right to say the bill needs a great deal of work before it could be regarded as acceptable. I think that's generally understood. To be charitable, the Secretary of State, I don't believe that it's his intention to restrict the powers of this Assembly. But I think that the consequences of the current bill, and I know members haven't seen it, there is a great danger that that would happen. It's right to say that Whitehall departments were asked what they thought was devolved. And of course, they will naturally tend to towards a minimalist model of devolution. One of the things that does concern me is that the implication that somehow, because there will be a single jurisdiction, that there's some kind of limit on how much separate Welsh legislation there can be, as if there was almost some kind of quota. Now, the Secretary of State assures me that isn't the case, but the difficulty is, within a single jurisdiction, that there are some in Whitehall departments who will take the view that's exactly what should happen. Now, we're not going to roll back to the days before 2011. The people of Wales have spoken. They want us to be able to legislate in those areas that are devolved. They don't want artificial restrictions placed on that. They don't care what the jurisdiction does, bluntly, but whether it's a single jurisdiction, probably, or a Welsh jurisdiction. But I honestly cannot understand what the hang-up is about the jurisdiction. Yes, it's right to say there are issues about the penal system, the prison system, probation and costs associated with that would need to be resolved. But Northern Ireland's jurisdiction, so is Scotland, so is the Isle of Man. As I said last week, there are at least 51 in the US, and the US hasn't fallen apart. I don't quite understand what the adherence is to the single jurisdiction, given the fact that Northern Ireland, with 1.8 million people, has been a single jurisdiction since, I think, 1921.
We now move back to questions on the paper, and question 3 is Susie Davis.
Diolch, Llywydd. Will the First Minister make a statement on ambulance response times in rural areas of South Wales West?
Yes, the latest published data shows the standard emergency response time across the South Wales West area, including rural areas, for August was among the best in Wales at 6 minutes and 48 seconds, with more than 70% of the most serious calls responded to within 8 minutes.
Thank you, First Minister. Of course, that time won't apply to rural areas where co-responders, of course, are responsible for providing an invaluable first response to emergency calls in areas where the 8-minute response time is virtually impossible to meet. Nevertheless, it can still take the actual ambulance a considerable amount of time to arrive, longer than you might expect, actually, with 13 cases in Gower waiting more than an hour over just 7 weeks in the summer, and that included one case where there was a fatality. Do you agree with the policy of ring fencing, whereby ambulances are retained in the centre of Swansea City and not permitted to answer emergency calls to Gower, despite being available? And so constituents in Gower have to wait for ambulances to arrive from Cardiff or Tenby to meet emergency calls.
I'm not aware of that being the case, but I will write to the member and investigate it for her to see whether that is the case, and if it is, why it is.
Ellen Jones.
Cysylltiedig â'r cwestiwn sy'n newid cael ei ofyn. Un o'r broblemau ar gyfer gwasanaeth ambulances a'r geilydd ambulances yn ardal fel Ceredigion yw fod ambulances yn teithio gyda cleifion i ardaloedd yn y de orllewin, yn ardal Abertawe neu Gyfyrddin, ac yna yn ateb galwadau yn yr ardaloedd hynny yn hytrach na dychwelyd yn syth yn ôl i Ceredigion, ac mae hynna'n effeithio ar yr geilydd ambulances ac ar atebion mewn pryd yng Ngheredigion. Ydych chi'n credu fod yn bryd i edrych ar model sydd wedi cael ei dreialu yn Cwm Taf i gadw ambulances i ddychwelyd i'r ardal le mae shifts nhw yn deillio o, fel fod yr argeilydd ambulances yna wedyn ar gyfer y cymunedau hynny, achos yr reality yw fod yna ormod o amserau pan dos na ddim ambulances ar gael yn gwahanol ardaloedd yng Ngheredigion.
Wel, mae'r pilot yng Nghwm Taf yn rhan o'n meddwl ni fel Llywodraeth, a ni mo'n gweld beth yw effaith y model hynny, ac i weld felly os mae yna ffordd i rolio'r model yna allan dros Gymru'n gyfan gwbl i sicrhau bod y gwasanaeth yn gwella. Mae hwnna'n rhywbeth sy'n cael ei ystyried yn y bryd.
Question 4, Jenny Rathbone.
What is the Welsh Government strategy for creating more affordable homes in South Wales?
We support the delivery of affordable housing in a number of ways, including maintaining investment in our social housing grant programme and expanding the housing finance grant scheme. So, for example, this year, £21.3 million is being invested through the social housing grant to support the delivery of affordable housing across the south of Wales.
That's excellent news, but obviously there's a great deal more we need to do. The Environment Committee visited the Salsa House in your constituency, I believe, near Bridgend, which is a house designed as a power station and offers really exciting opportunities for delivering affordable housing fit for the 21st century, because not only energy than it produces, but it only costs £1,000 a square metre, which is well within the envelope that social and council housing providers generally allow for. So I just wondered how we can take forward this fantastic Welsh invention led by Cardiff University's School of Architecture and ensure that we have Welsh house builders using Welsh materials and Welsh installers to build the homes that we need so much for our communities.
I'm aware of the Salsa House, and it is an exciting and innovative prototype. It has the potential to offer substantial benefits in terms of tackling fuel poverty, for example, and creating Welsh jobs. Now, I know the completed house is going to be the subject of detailed monitoring over a 12-month period, so it's still early to say whether it's capable of being replicated, but I look forward to seeing the results of that monitoring.
Mark Isherwood.
Although increasing housing supply is the best way to make housing more affordable, successive reports, most recently Bevan Foundation, have said that Wales is only meeting the requirement for half the new homes needed, with the biggest shortfall in social housing. Given the UK announcement of 200,000 starter homes for England as part of an ambition for 1 million new homes by 2020, what discussions has your government had with registered social landlords, with builders and with local authorities to explore the possibility of a starter homes initiative appropriate to the needs of Wales?
It'll work because, of course, it's designed to ensure that people can buy houses, not rent them. We know that for many people, even being able to raise the deposit to buy a house, even with the schemes that we have in place, and servicing the mortgage is a problem. So to suggest, as the Prime Minister does, that you can somehow replace social housing for rent with starter homes, we think is not going to be effective. Nor do we think it's effective to actually seek to resolve the issue of the supply of social housing by selling it off, which is what the UK government is trying to do.
Jocelyn Davis.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, your government's projections for the 20 years up to 2031 shows the number of Cardiff households increasing by 47,000, and that's about a third of the figure for the whole of Wales. Do you consider this desirable?
Well, there are two questions here. Firstly, what can you do in order to control the growth of a city that's successful? We know that people will go to where they think the jobs are, will try and live as close as possible to where they think those jobs are available, and Cardiff is growing at the rate of knots. You can't say to people, you can't live in Cardiff, so you've got to live somewhere else. That said, it is important that local authorities work together to provide solutions across the whole of you call it the capital region, I suppose, to make sure that there are alternatives available in other local authority areas that are well connected, and provide the opportunity for people to live outside of the boundaries of Cardiff and yet still be able to access work effectively.
Question 5, John Griffiths.
Will the First Minister make a statement on Welsh Government policy to support public transport in Newport East?
Well, our policy is to support public transport across all parts of Wales, including, of course, regional priorities. They're outlined, of course, in the National Transport Finance Plan. I think members were provided with an up-to-date. I trust members were provided with an update on the plan on the 22nd of September.
First Minister, I receive a lot of concerns from constituents regarding local bus services and a lack of a comprehensive, planned, strategic approach to the provision of adequate services. Would you agree with me that the Welsh Government should have further powers so that they can properly regulate bus services in Wales, which I believe would also help deliver the step change of the proposed metro system?
Yes, I do, and it's something the UK Government has agreed on, of course, that this needs to be devolved. I was surprised to see the comments regarding the establishment of a Welsh Traffic Commissioner last week. I mean, there are many of us in this chamber who have experience of dealing with a Traffic Commissioner in Birmingham, and I think it's fair to say it is not a worthwhile experience. I've had several experiences of it, and they have done nothing to resolve problems locally. We do need a Traffic Commissioner based in Wales, not one that sees Wales as a kind of annex to the West Midlands of England. It's true to say that in many parts of Wales, what we effectively see now is a private monopoly of bus services. On some routes, of course, there's competition, but mainly not. Now, we know, if we look at the railways, that where there is a private monopoly along a certain route, then regulation is involved. The same principle applies to buses.
Mohammed Ashgar.
Presiding Officer. First Minister, Newport City Council has cut funding by 12% since 2010. In addition, cuts by your government to bus operators' grant have resulted in bus services in Newport East and elsewhere in South Wales East being reduced gradually, and in some instances is totally cancelled. Given the bus services are vital for the most vulnerable in our society, will the First Minister confirm that his government will take no further action that will result in cut to bus services in Wales?
Well, that rather depends on your friends in Westminster, doesn't it? And what happens in the comprehensive spending review. And again, I mean, the member stands up conveniently forgetting that his own party wants to cut spending on transport by 30%. That's what they've said. In fair, I commend their honesty, I have to say, but that's what they've said. So he cannot stand up with any real presence in this chamber and complain about cuts to bus transport imposed by the UK government when his own party thinks those cuts don't go far enough.
Question 6, Jonathan Saunders.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Will the First Minister make a statement on GP services in Aberconwy?
Yes, the provision of GP services in Aberconwy is the responsibility of Betsy Cadwallader University Health Board, and the board is working to ensure people continue to have access to primary care, including where some contracted GP services have given termination notices.
Thank you, First Minister. The Royal College of GPs has already highlighted that prolonged underinvestment has had a significant impact across Wales. In Aberconwy, we are now down to locum provision only in what was once a very busy GP-led practice, and a partner in another local surgery advises me now of an imminent meltdown facing us as some of our local GPs look to retire in less than 12 months. What are you actually doing as First Minister with overall responsibility for any service provision in Wales? Or is this just another example of your poor governance and a case of Nero fiddling whilst Rome burns?
Well, first of all, there are more GPs now. Their numbers have risen in the past few years. And we know that in some parts of Wales, for example, where the contractor model no longer applies, the health boards have run the services perfectly adequately. If we look, for example, at Meddygfa Gyffin, which you'll be aware of, the GP practice in Conwy, it's been run by the board since the 1st of April 2015, and now a provider has been identified to take that practice over with a start date of the 1st of February of next year, without any effect on the service made available to local people. The difficulty is, of course, that most GP practices are self-employed. They're effectively private practices that operate within the NHS, I suppose, if we look at it from that perspective. And quite often, little notice is given by surgeries as to what their intentions are. But however, when that notice is given, and for example, in Denbighshire, the surgeries have worked with the local health board, then services can, of course, be preserved.
Sir Griffith.
Diolch Llywydd, chi'n dweud bod fwy o ddoctoriaid nawr nag o'r blaen, ond wrth gwrs i ni hefyd yn gwybod drwy waith ymchwil gan y BMA bod 30% o ddoctoriaid naill ai wedi neu yn dioddau o burnout, a bod 41% ymhellach i hynny yn gofidio byddan nhw'n gwynebu burnout yn y dyfodol agos. Allwch chi ddeithio ni felly faint o ddoctoriaid i chi'n tybio sydd i angen yng Nghymru er mwyn sicrhau gwasanaeth dyledus i bobl Cymru?
Wel, ni moyn sicrhau bod mwy o feddygon tiliol, wrth gwrs. Mae'n anodd iawn i weid faint o surgeons ynglyn â'r ymenydd sydd eisiau hynny ac ar llefydd sydd yn ar meysydd sydd yn arbennig. Ond ni moyn sicrhau bod y twf yn y nifer o feddygon tiliol yn parhau yn y pen draw. A dyna pam, wrth gwrs, enghraifft, mae Betsy Cadwallader wedi bod yn gweithio gyda Pendyffryn, enghraifft, ac wrth gwrs, y meddygfa arall ym Mhrestatyn er mwyn sicrhau bod gwasanaeth yn parhau bod newidiadau wedi bod yn amgylchiadau'r doctoriaid ei hunain.
Alan Roberts.
Diolch Llywydd. Prif wneud wrth ystyried bod yna gymaint o meddygfeydd yn y gogledd yn gwynebu'r sefyllfa yma. Mae yna gynllun tigredig canol tymor gan Betsy Cadwallader sydd wedi bod yn cael ei baratoi ers mis Mawrth eleni. Dych chi'n fodlon wrth ystyried bod y bwrdd o dan mesur arbennig bod nhw'n delio fo hwn efo digon o frys achos mae cyfnodion mis Gorffennaf yn deud bod nhw ddim yn awyddus i ddelio efo'r cynllun terfynol tan mis Ebrill 2016. Felly fydd yna rhyw 19 mis o oedi cyn i'r cynllun o ran y gweithlu gael ei drafod o flaen y bwrdd.
Wel, mae rhaid bod wrth gwrs, i drafod hwnna ac i weithredu yn fanwl ac yn gyflym. Ond gael ddweud hefyd bod yna fframwaith canaliadwyeth gyda ni fel Llywodraeth, a mae meddygfeydd yn gallu gofyn am gefnogaeth i helpu nhw, lle maen nhw'n meddwl bod yna risg i practis nhw. Ac wrth gwrs yn gynharach y flwyddyn hyn, nath, a mae hwnna'n rhan ateb i beth wedodd yr aelod dros Aberconwy. Roedd y manylion o 40 miliwn o gronfa ynglyn â gofal blaenllaw wedi cael ei sefydlu mwyn sicrhau bod arian ar gael i helpu meddygon teuluol i ddatblygu i practices.
Question 7, Angela Burns.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Good afternoon, First Minister. Will you make a statement on superfast broadband in West Wales?
Yes, good afternoon. Well, to date, the Superfast Cymru project has overseen almost £23 million worth of investment into fast broadband provision in the West, with over 80,000 premises receiving access to superfast broadband as a result of the project.
Minister, as you will know only too well, more and more businesses in particular, from a commercial point of view, rely on having good broadband availability, whether it's from doing VAT and inland revenue and company house returns, to sales and marketing drives, to paying staff, paying suppliers, and indeed receiving payments. And yet throughout my constituency, I have significant areas, not all of them particularly rural, places like Pembroke and Saundersfoot, where we are struggling to get the Superfast Broadband project to come on stream quickly enough. BT are pushing back the timescales again and again and again, and the emails I have on this issue are legion. I wonder, First Minister, if you could direct your delivery unit, or could you look at some method for your government to see what account you can be holding BT to ensure that this project is spread equitably throughout Wales, because the cities such as Cardiff are constantly being upgraded and having all the latest stuff, and rural areas are being left out, and it's hurting our economy.
Well, I mean, first of all, we expect the delivery of Superfast Cymru to be on target. Secondly, the member is right. We do need to make sure that businesses have access to superfast broadband. Some 60% in Pembrokeshire do, only 40% so far in Carmarthenshire. And she may have heard me say in the past that I take the view that broadband in the 21st century, or superfast broadband in the 21st century, is the equivalent of the railway lines of the 19th. You have to be connected in order to be successful as a business. In Cardiff, of course, and much of the southern coast and the northeast, it's a commercial rollout. There are sufficient people there for the companies to be able to justify their investment. We know that's not true of a lot of Wales, which is why Superfast Cymru exists in the first place. We know that those 80,000 premises would never have superfast broadband if it wasn't for the investment that's been put in. What I can say to you and your constituents is we expect this to be taken forward as quickly as possible. And we do understand, of course, the importance of superfast broadband to businesses.
Ellen Jones.
Prif Weinidog, mae profiad Ceredigion yn debyg iawn i'r hyn mae Angela Burns newydd amlinellu, gyda rhai cymunedau pentrefi cyfan yn dod yn cael gwybod erbyn hyn fyddan nhw ddim yn rhan o rollout ban llydan cyflym fel o'n nhw wedi rhagweld. Sut felly chi fel Llywodraeth yn gallu rhoi eglurder i gymunedau ac i bentrefi a threfi o ran hynny, a fyddan nhw yn rhan o'r Superfast Cymru ar gyfer Mai 2016 neu hyd yn oed 2017, ac os nad ydyn nhw, yna pa gynlluniau pendant iawn mae Llywodraeth Cymru yn gallu gynnig i wneud yn siŵr fod y cymunedau yma ddim yn cael ei gadael ar ôl?
Dwi'n cael ei adael ar ôl. Dwi'n deall bod rhan fwyaf o bobl sydd yn rhan o gyfniwedfa Aberystwyth nawr yn cael broadband, rhywun peth a borth a just dros hanner yn rhyd y pennau. Ond wrth gwrs mae yna waith i wneud. Ni'n erbyn bydd y BT yn bwrw'r target o 655,000 o lefydd erbyn haf nesa. Ac wrth gwrs mae rhaid yn wrth gwrs i sicrhau bod nhw'n delifero yn ôl y gytundeb i hunan erbyn mis Mehefin 2017.
William Powell.
Diolch, Llywydd. Following the concerns expressed around this chamber, First Minister, would you agree with me that it would be useful, as has been suggested by the Countryside Alliance, to have a not-spot summit so that areas such as Ceredigion, Carmarthen East and other parts of West Wales that are so badly affected in this way could share good practice, consider options, and also bring to the fore quite how serious the economic impact is of the blight of not having the broadband that you quite rightly described has been essential for doing business in the 21st century?
Well, the answer to the question is Superfast Cymru, in my view. The target will be hit by the summer of next year. I can say, of course, that the contract with BT has been extended to cover over 42,000 premises identified as not scheduled to be addressed under the Superfast Cymru project or commercial rollout, so it is being extended in that way. It's not a question of if, it is a question of when. And I know that BT are working hard to make sure that the target is hit. I expect the target to be hit in the summer of next year, and of course for the contract to be completed satisfactorily by the following year.
Question 8, Peter Black.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. What discussions has the Welsh Government had with the UK Government regarding the Swansea Bay Tidal Lagoon?
We have regular discussions over what is an ambitious project that we fully support, a project that we believe will bring significant projected economic benefits to not just to Swansea Bay, but beyond. There is a huge amount of foot dragging from Whitehall on this, and we are no further forward in terms of understanding what the strike price will be and what the commercial atmosphere will be for the investors.
Thank you for that answer, First Minister. I raised with the Natural Resources Minister last week my concerns about the 1-year delay in constructing this lagoon simply because of the foot dragging that's taking place over the feed-in tariff. Can I ask whether you've had any indication from the UK government whether the timescale they've set down in terms of the feed-in tariff by the end of this year will be met? And are you concerned to me that if that continues past the new year, that will put this project in jeopardy?
We've had no indication of the time frame, I have to say to the member. We have asked for it, but no indication of it. I think it's there for all to see that the UK government is not supportive of renewables. Of course, we've seen the subsidies removed from photovoltaic cells. We've seen the subsidies removed from onshore wind. We've seen a gigantic loan being made with regard to the Hinkley nuclear power station, but nothing on this tidal lagoon. Whilst all the consents are in place or close to being in place, until we know what the strike price will be, it's not going to go ahead. It's about time we got some certainty from Whitehall on this.
David Rees.
First Minister, it is hugely disappointing that this project has been delayed because of the foot dragging in Whitehall. However, what's important in this innovative project in here is the actual skills that we can develop in the creation of the tidal Bay Lagoon, and the fact that we can take those skills into other projects beyond the coastal areas around Wales. What discussions have you had about apprenticeships and the skills needs of Tidal Bay Lagoon so we can develop those skills now here in Wales? Well,
I noticed in the Conservative benches there was some chuckling. They'd be far better off. They pulled their fingers out and actually did some representation of Wales in Whitehall and got this project, which is a great driver of jobs in Wales, off the ground. Instead, they sit there and pontificate instead. But there we are. We expect nothing less from them, and so I'm trying to be charitable as well in that regard. But he's right. There are huge opportunities for Port Talbot. There are huge opportunities for the Haven Waterway in terms of manufacturing the kit, in terms of maintaining the kit as well. And yet we've had zero support from the UK government or the Welsh Conservative Party.
Altaf Hussain.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. First Minister, do you agree that the strike price will be in reality a subsidy to the tidal lagoon, and that it is therefore vital that the government ensures that any strike price gets the right balance between the cost to the taxpayers and support for the industry? Given the challenging economic climate, do you also agree that the government does not rush into a strike price that disadvantages the taxpayers and energy bills?
Well, that doesn't seem to apply to nuclear power, I must say. But no, I do think actually that the UK government's energy policy is an omni-shambles. No one, and this is industry saying this, they have no idea what the UK government wants, no idea what the energy policy of the UK is. The Swansea Bay Tidal Lagoon is an immensely useful project, but absolutely no support so far from the Conservatives because it doesn't fit into their view of the world. They'd much rather see us import more and more energy with all the costs of energy security, but that doesn't matter at the moment. This is a project that delivers renewable energy at a high rate, at a cheap rate, that will employ lots of people in Wales, and the Conservatives over there don't care.
Diolch Lywyn, mi ddwedwch chi gynnau Brif Weinidog bod y caniatadau I gyd bron y bod ni lle, a mae hynny yn bwysig oherwydd mae gan Cyfoeth Naturiol Cymru wrth gwrs rôl bwysig i'w chwarae o safbwynt caniatadau amgylcheddol yn Morlyn Bai Abertawe, fel gobeithio fydd ganddyn nhw mewn nifer o brosiectau eraill tebyg yn y dyfodol. Nawr, mae yna gonsern wrth gwrs ynglyn â capacity Cyfoeth Naturiol Cymru I fedru dilifro caniatadau, yn enwedig os ydy hynny'n cynyddu yn y blynydde I ddod. Allwch chi felly drwy gydnabod bod eich llywodraeth chi yn rhoi mwy o ddyletswyddau ar Cyfoeth Naturiol Cymru ar un llaw ac yn lleihau cyllidebau nhw ar y llaw arall, allwch chi roi sicrwydd I ni y byddwch chi yn gwarchod y capacity ar adnoddau hynny mwyn gwneud yn siŵr bod nhw mewn sefyllfa I fedru cyflawni'r rôl yna yn effeithiol.
Mae'n sicrhau wrth gwrs bod adnoddau ar gael I nhw mwyn bod yn gallu sicrhau eu dyletswyddau, ond does dim arwydd o gwbl bod yna broblem ynglyn â Chyfoeth Naturiol Cymru ynglyn â delio gyda'r cais hyn.
Question 9, Kirsty Williams.
Will the First Minister make a statement on the regeneration of market towns?
I will again. Across Wales, there are many market towns that play a crucial role in the Welsh economy. We're supporting those towns to grow and prosper through initiatives such as town centre partnerships, business improvement districts and town centre loan schemes. And of course, we supported the High Street campaign again this year.
One of the ways in which your government has indeed been supporting one market town in Brecon and Radnorshire was by the appointment of a town development officer for Llandrindod Dodd Wells that came out of the work that had been chaired by Justin Baird Murray. Now that post is due to come to an end. It has begun to make a real impact in the town. I recently opened the first ever Wales's Youth Market. Would the government be favourable to looking to extending funding for that post so that we can really get value for money out of it and we can continue to develop the important work that has started in the town?
Well, let me write to the member on that. Although I do take account of what you said about the beneficial effect that there has been on Llandrindod. We know that so many towns have been affected over the years through online trading. We know that's a major challenge. We know, for example, that the addition of a supermarket, even slightly out of a town centre, which is the case, of course, in Llandrindod, has an effect on trade within the town centre. But I will write to the member on that.
Russell George.
First Minister, I'm sure you will agree with me that we want to see bustling high streets and busy high streets. And to achieve this, of course, we need to think of ways in which our market towns can compete with, as you said, the internet and also out-of-town shopping centres, which pose the obvious threat. Can I ask what the government is doing to encourage more flexible parking arrangements, such as free parking for the first 2 hours? Clearly, this would be a way in which businesses could compete with out-of-town centres.
Honestly, he could urge his own council to follow such flexible parking policies. I'm sure that he would. I don't think free parking is necessarily the answer. It's true to say, for example, that Cowbridge is successful. Cowbridge is a town with a high per capita income. It does have free parking, that's true, but it's not an easy place to park in, as people will know. Narberth, for example, which has prospered and done very, very well, doesn't have a free car park, if I remember, at the top of the town. Ultimately, what the town needs is to give a reason for people to come into the town to shop, to have the range of shops that are unusual, that will draw people in and create an atmosphere where people will want to come and shop in that town. And that's what Narberth has done successfully, it's what Cowbridge has done successfully over the years, it's what Carmarthen has done successfully over the years. So yes, there are opportunities there for town centres, and there are opportunities for traders to work together to achieve a common vision for a town, and we see there are towns in Wales that have managed to achieve just that. But ultimately, shops need customers. It doesn't matter what you offer in terms of business support. If they don't have any customers, they're going to close. And ultimately, of course, shops need to make sure that they're not competing directly necessarily with the online retailers and with the supermarkets. And we see in towns like Narberth that it's possible to do that.
Rhys Iorwerth.
Diolch Llywydd, ydy'r Prif Weinidog yn cytuno efo'r bydd alla ddod o greu strategaethau datblygu economi yn rhanbarthol ac y gallai hynny gynnwys creu hubs rhanbarthol fel modd o greu bwrlwm economaidd sydd wrth gwrs yn gwbl hanfodol mwyn datblygu ardaloedd ledled Cymru yn cynnwys yn trefi marchnadu.
Wel, na'n gwybod beth ni'n ei nawr wrth gwrs gyda'r partneriaethau ynglyn â canol trefi, Llangefni yn un ohonyn nhw, wrth gwrs, yn ei etholaeth he. Cyfyrddin Porthmadog, y Fenni, hefyd Abergwaun, a hefyd wrth gwrs mae gyda ni cronfa benthygiadau i drefi hefyd, a mae yna wedi cael ei roi i Geredigion, Powys, Sir Benfro a Sir Fynwy mwyn wneud hynny. So byddwn ni'n dadlau bod hwnna'n digwydd yn barod.
Thank you, First Minister. We now move to item 2.